For almost half a millennia, the European continent was a cauldron of conflicts. From the 30 Years' War and the brutal religious conflicts, all the way to the First and Second World War, not to mention the Napoleonic Wars in between, we saw the worst of human civilization and the war machine. But it was precisely that violent background that propelled post-war leaders in Europe to create the foundations of what many consider as a geopolitical miracle, namely the European Union. Beginning with sectoral cooperation, especially in coal and steel between two former nemesis, France and Germany, the European community expanded into a formidable geopolitical force and over time also an economic powerhouse. At one point, the European Union was competing with the United States as the biggest economic unit on Earth. Nevertheless, it has not been a smooth ride for the European Union. Despite its tremendous success in earlier decades, we saw the advent of Brexit and increasing Euroscepticism even among continental European nations. More than that, we see the rise of right-wing populism, not to mention the invasion of Ukraine, which has jolted the European Union out of its stupor. Nevertheless, the European Union has tried to present itself as a force for good and as a potential alternative force for constructive diplomacy, multilateralism, and a rules-based international order. Having successfully moved towards a monetary union and a certain degree of fiscal coordination, the European Union now is also moving towards greater coordination in terms of its foreign and defense policy. As a result, Europe is more united than ever, or at least that's how it wants to project itself. And when it comes to conflicts all around the world, including here in the region in the Indo-Pacific, the EU wants to be a major player and to be a positive contributor to regional peace and stability. In order to understand the roots and history of the European Union, its evolution over time, and how it's going to play a more important role in arguably the most dynamic region on Earth, the Indo-Pacific, let's talk to someone who knows a thing or two about the topic. Joining us tonight is European Union Ambassador Luc Veron. Good evening, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Richard. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
This is it. We were looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. But before we shift gears and go into the hot button issues, can you tell us a little bit about how did you end up in the European Union diplomatic machinery?
Well, I joined the European Union project when I was 28.
Oh, wow.
So 34 years ago.
I thought like 3 years ago.
So that's how you become ambassador to the Philippines. Very important post for us.
Yes, yes. And what was his journey? I mean, obviously this also coincided with the expansion of the European Union, the deepening of its bureaucracy.
I joined literally 3-4 working days before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Oh, wow.
So I was educated, I'm a kid of the Cold War.
Right.
I was educated in international relations during the Cold War. So that was our curriculum.
Right.
And
you mean Sovietology, I mean, essentially.
Yes, and all the problems linked to the division of the world between two major powers. And I joined the European Union in November '89, literally a few days
before. Oh,
before
the Berlin Wall fell in November, early November.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And I was lucky enough to be assigned to the German desk. So my first job in the European Commission was to be a young economist on the Germany desk of the Economic and Finance Department of the European Commission. So I witnessed firsthand the sort of the old world collapsing and a new world coming up. So I've witnessed the enlargement, the deepening of the European Union, the creation of the euro, and more recently Brexit and so on. So it's been quite a journey.
Before we talk about the more grim stuff like Brexit, we had the British ambassador also here. Let's talk about this end of history moment, you know, the reunification of Germany. Allegedly. I mean, it's a short moment. You know, friends in Berlin last year were telling me this is at most a 20-25 year window, a special moment of miracle that allowed for the European Union to expand. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How excited were you of coming of age as a diplomat during this era?
Definitely very excited. Very excited because again, that was the transition from being a student to being a practitioner, and the world is changing. So that was indeed very exciting. We were young, very enthusiastic. working very hard, still working hard, but working very hard then. And yes, that was very exciting. And then we had the transition to the enlargement of the European Union. Basically, that was the objective, that at some point Eastern countries will join the European Union. They joined on 1st May 2004, so a few years later. But definitely that was the process going to that, to a union of 28 and now 27 member states, an entity, if you wish, of almost 500 million people.
Yeah, and one of the three largest economies out there. Last time I checked, once almost the biggest economy in the world. Now, speaking of the European Union, I mean, you went towards monetary union, Maastricht Treaty,
Right.
and then later on discussions a little bit about fiscal union, not so successful on that. But one of the important things, and this is really your portfolio, is this kind of a common foreign defense policy. EU having its own de facto
A political union.
political union in that sense, and Jacques Chirac, and we know the history of the efforts to create a united Europe, united European states. I mean, to what degree have you moved in that direction? Because the usual criticism is this kind of Kissingerian critic, right? Like, I know who to, I mean, like, if I want to talk to China, I know who to call in Beijing. If I want to talk to United States, well, he's from I want to talk to any country. But he said, when it comes to European Union, I don't know who to call. Who's the foreign policy chief or counterpart if you were an American foreign secretary, chief diplomat?
But that's a motto, if you wish, of the past.
Yeah.
Because today it's pretty much clear how foreign policy is formulated within the European Union. It's a policy that is formulated by the member states. So there are different layers of integration, if you wish, within the European Union. Very integrated in terms of trade, majority voting on many issues. But when it comes to foreign policy, this is unanimity.
Oh, it has to be so very ASEAN.
In that sense, yes.
Yeah.
Only for foreign policy and defense policy. But definitely we have a person by the name of the High Representative, who is my boss, who is in charge of chairing the Foreign Affairs and Defense Ministers Council, and formulating, if you wish, as a group, EU foreign and defense policy.
Joseph Borrell, right?
Joseph Borrell is that person, yes. He's the third. We had first Cathy Ashton, then we had Federica Mogherini, and now we have Joseph Borrell, with the High Representative for Foreign Policy.
Yeah, I mean, Mogherini, and also before that, I mean, the EU had played a very important role in some high-stake diplomatic games like the Iranian nuclear negotiations.
Correct.
For some of us who covered this throughout the decade or so. Now, of course, when it comes to the current administration, and your current boss for that matter, obviously the past 2 years or so has been extremely challenging for the European Union. First, of course, the Ukrainian conflict, and now you have this latest round of conflict in the Middle East.
Correct.
Now, EU has come under criticism, perhaps unfairly for some, or for some legitimately. I mean, there's a lot of debate out there that the EU's response to Ukraine, and compared to its response to the humanitarian tragedy happening in Gaza, there seems to be inconsistency or double standard. That's a criticism that is coming out. But more importantly, going back to what you were arguing, Ambassador, you were saying that there is a kind of a consolidation mechanism. Nevertheless, if you listen to the speeches by the Spanish Prime Minister or the Belgian Prime Minister, including their recent speech at the Rafah border, and you listen to President Macron 3 weeks ago versus 2 weeks ago, and when you listen to Scholz and some of the leaders, there is an impression that it doesn't seem necessarily on the same page. I mean, so what is the process of diversity and unity dynamics within the European Union? Or are we seeing it wrongly? I mean, what is your take on that?
I think up to a point, we are comparing things which are not really comparable. But the key word that you pronounced was tragedies. And these are two tragedies, but they are tragedies with different elements. On the one hand, the invasion by Russia of a sovereign neighbor, Ukraine, is one, it's state versus state, and it's a human tragedy. To which we have reacted very strongly, and together with a vast number of members of the United Nations, including the Philippines, because obviously it is not acceptable to bully a smaller neighbor. It's not according to the charter, the UN Charter, and so on and so forth. And it's a human tragedy. Another human tragedy is, of course, what happened with the terrorist attack of Hamas on the 7th of October. And the reaction by a sovereign state, Israel, against that particular organization and the Gaza Strip. These are two different international relation issue, if you wish. On the one hand, two sovereign states fighting. On the other hand, a sovereign state versus a terrorist organization.
In an occupied territory.
In an
which
occupied territory with all the
yeah.
complexity of international law pertaining to this. In both cases, we have been fairly consistent in recalling the international law and international humanitarian law.
Yes.
In both cases, so that's a commonality. But definitely, this is a different issue. And by the way, we have been often accused, we, the European Union, of being a friend of the Palestinian, which is a title that we could, we could accept, given the fact that we are the more important donor to the Palestinian people. The other thing that I find a little bit awkward in this conversation sometimes when comparing this situation with the other is that basically two things. One is some people would consider that Hamas is the representative of the Palestinian people. This is not something that we as European Union
because there's
accept.
a Palestinian authority.
There is a Palestinian authority who are our interlocutors and with whom my boss, Josep Borrell, we mentioned a few minutes ago, engaged last week. And we will continue to engage. And we will continue to advocate for a political solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through a two-state solution. This is clearly the position of the European Union. That hasn't changed. The other thing that I feel a bit awkward is sometimes the hesitation to call Hamas what it is, a terrorist organization. And for the European Union,
calling out what happened on October 7, claiming the lives of children
it's
and
definitely a terrorist organization that
Yeah.
should be labeled as such. And we are not shy to do that as European Union. Actually, I was checking the other day the lists of organization entities that we consider terrorists around the world, and it's a very small list. So it's a very high toll to
threshold
to make it threshold to make it to that list. There is one Filipino organization, and there is Hamas, but there are only 21 altogether in the world. But definitely, I don't understand sometimes the hesitation of some to say, well, it's not a terrorist organization. Definitely, it's a terrorist organization.
Or not calling out what happened on October 7, which is, civilians were killed. That's unacceptable. Yeah.
On the other hand, it's very clear that for the European Union, it's a problem that is very close to home. We are neighbors, not only to Ukraine, but also to the Middle East.
Yes, it's very near, yeah.
And also we have large Jewish and Muslim communities in our countries. So we don't want to, and we have seen evidence of tension between
Islamophobia and anti-Semitism.
Yeah. And this is something we are very, very concerned with. But it's also very, very true, and this is something that is often forgotten from far away, that the Holocaust of the Jews happened on our continent.
Right.
So we European, in general, we feel an historic responsibility vis-a-vis...
especially Germany, I suppose. Yeah.
Especially Germany, but I would say all of us. And I would think that the heart of the European integration project, definitely that story, the story of the Second World War, and how to overcome the atrocities and build a peaceful future, was the political project of the European Union. So this is something that is very close to home, very close to our heart. And definitely my boss, Josep Borrell, has been very, very active to try to find ways to provide humanitarian relief for the Palestinians that are trapped in Gaza and so on. But at the same time, even now, I know that some people say, let's not talk about the day after. Even now, talk about a political solution, because that's the only guarantee for long-term peace.
Ambassador, I mean, you pointed out the necessity for, you know, calling a spade a spade. You know, at the same time, you have, you know, the Spanish Prime Minister, the Belgian Prime Minister talking about, you know, I mean, more than 100 children killed in Gaza on a daily basis throughout a number of weeks. Yeah. The number of casualties in Gaza has surpassed what's happening even in Ukraine by some account. Over a year, we were talking about in the case of Ukraine. Yeah. To what degree has the European Union been clear about respect for international humanitarian law, obligations in occupied territories, ensuring that there's a political solution?
Absolutely clear, and we have made that very clear to our Israeli friends.
Ambassador, talking about political solutions, is there, to what degree does the European Union want to be involved in a kind of more regional approach, right? Because I don't think we can have a solution to this if you don't involve the folks from the Arab world, some of the key other interlocutors, potentially even China, right? And I think the same thing would also apply to Ukraine. I mean, both of them will need a long-term political solution, because there's no military solution really to these two tragedies, even though you were saying the legal context is very different. Yeah.
But there is a difference, though, in the two situations, both of them being tragedies. On the one hand, you have Ukraine, a sovereign state that can speak for itself. On the other hand, you have the Palestinian people
who are divided between
who
Gaza
are divided
and West
between geographically divided, but also who definitely need that their voice be represented on the international scene, both by their neighbors, themselves, and everyone that can contribute to a political solution. And definitely, Europe is ready to do its part. And again, speaking about the mid to long term, so not
including
only
calling out illegal settlements and other, you know, things that are happening in the West Bank.
We have done that over the years.
Now let's pivot to Asia, right?
Right.
Where there is, I mean, it's really grim when we talk about the Middle East and Eastern Europe. I mean, two regions that, you know, a lot of us pay a lot of attention to, because still they're important theaters on so many levels.
Yes.
But Asia, of course, for many is the region of the future.
Absolutely.
Now, let's first talk about, I mean, even in the context of the Ukraine conflict, one of the things that I felt made us in the Philippines feel very special is the fact that I think Philippines is the only ASEAN country, in addition to the exiled Myanmar government, that has consistently voted in favor of Ukraine and against the violation of international law by Russia. Has this been noticed enough in the West? Because I don't think that, because some of that happened during the Duterte administration, which is not known as the most pro-Western government, but I feel that tells something more profound about Philippine-EU relations, right?
I strongly believe that the Philippines is one of the key partners of the European Union in the region, in the Indo-Pacific. And definitely the Indo-Pacific is critical for our security and our prosperity. And therefore, you have noticed that the current president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, visited the Philippines. She came all the way from Brussels, and
first time ever, right?
First time ever, a president of the Commission visited the Philippines. We were very excited. It was a very important visit. She was very well received, and she engaged in a very meaningful conversation with the leadership of the Philippines. So I think that's a sign that although we have a very busy neighborhood agenda,
portfolio,
we don't lose sight of Asia. Asia is important. The Indo-Pacific is very important to Europe.
Before we go to the China Indo-Pacific question and all, I mean, I still want to focus on the Philippine-EU relations. I remember very well, I mean, just a decade ago or so, there were a lot of discussion about this special partnership between EU and the Philippines, both as kind of a beacons of democracy. And in the case of the Philippines, of course, it was a booming economy back then. Now, we had quite a difficult interlude, I would put it mildly, during the Duterte administration. I was back and forth to Brussels in the Philippines, talking to our counterparts there. But it looks like there's hope right now that we can pick up where we left off a decade ago, where there was a hope of us even finalizing a bilateral free trade agreement, pushing for the kind of a security partnership that you have been negotiating with Korea, Australia, even Vietnam for that matter.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ambassador, and how the von der Leyen's visit was crucial in that regard? Yeah.
Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, came to the Philippines with a very simple message. The Philippines are important to us, and we want to do more with the Philippines, starting with potentially negotiating a free trade agreement. We are at the time when we're looking at the different chapters and seeing what the level of ambition should be. But the two leaders were very clear. They tasked their team to complete this exercise by the end of 2023 and potentially to start negotiating in 2024. That's very important. Second, it was a message about sort of solidarity. You say, has it been noticed enough that the Philippines voted with Europe and others, the vast majority of the members of the United Nations on Ukraine? Yes, it has been noticed, very much so. And what the president here came to see, came here to say, is that in the same vein, we want to show our solidarity with the Philippines when it comes to international law. And that implies also us speaking up on the South China Sea.
And there were discussions on even maritime security cooperation partnership. I mean, we already have quite a robust relationship with the United States, Australia, with Britain, your former member, Japan, and increasingly, of course, also with France and some of the key members within Europe. So at the level of the European Union, what are we looking at in terms of helping domain awareness, capacity building?
That's very important. Actually, the Philippines is a pioneer in using our maritime awareness system free of charge. And we have trained the Philippine Coast Guard, Philippine Navy, and other agencies of the Philippine government. Basically, we also think that maybe the Philippines can be an inspiration for neighbors in ASEAN to use the same system and be able to communicate better between each other, because that's a very interesting platform also to communicate between agencies of the same country, but also with foreign actors. So that's one thing. We have not yet coordinated maritime presence, but we have had an increase of maritime presence of our EU navies, plural. And we will have more cooperation on maritime, I'm pretty sure. We have created a subcommittee, a sort of structure where we discuss all these issues. And this is something that we will continue to do and improve. And I know that our member states will also step up to the plate and offer their own bilateral cooperation in this context.
Ambassador, I mean, just to give an insight, like how is this does EU do the coordination part? Because we have counterparts from France, counterpart from Germany, among others, who are being more involved in this part of the world. How does the EU? What is the overlay, bureaucratic overlay, or strategic coordination going on there?
We have a lot of. First of all, we have an Indo-Pacific strategy as an EU. And we discuss a lot how to better engage the Indo-Pacific. There are certain areas, and it's very important to understand that there are certain areas which are national competences. For example, a very simple example, trade promotion or investment promotion. And as I tell my Filipino friends, I mean, you get the best deals because basically these guys are competing to give you the best offers. So there are certain areas where the member states, our nations will continue to play their role, but it's a fairly coordinated role. There are areas in the world, geographic areas in the world, where we have, as I call it, coordinated maritime presence. This is something that we could envisage also in the
which is slightly different from joint patrols, right? I mean, coordinated maritime presence, not necessarily joint patrols.
Let's take, for example, our maritime awareness product, our system. We have conducted exercises with, for example, with the French Navy and the Philippine Navy, using this particular platform. So yes, we have a lot that we can do together.
Let me pivot back a little bit to the trade. I mean, you said that we're moving towards a more positive direction in the FTA negotiations. You already have one with Vietnam and Singapore. And to be honest, one of the issues I raised, and me, I'm going to push it a little bit. My concern was that in the past, I heard from some of the folks in the commission that, there were concerns about human rights, political, developments in the Philippines. And I always raised my eyebrows and said, I mean, by any measure, the Philippines is way ahead of Vietnam and even Singapore when it comes to democratic politics. So I just felt, that kind of explanation didn't really cut it for me. But now that Philippines, by many indications, moving in the right direction, what are the other hurdles, perhaps? Your regulatory framework, investment environment? Because I can understand why Vietnam and Singapore are so attractive economically.
Mm-hmm. What is important, in my view, and I have said that repeatedly, as an economist, I always look at the situation now, so basically the static, and the dynamic.
The snapshot.
And when you look at the dynamics of the Philippine economy, I mean, you see an economy that is probably the second fastest growing economy in Asia, or fastest growing in Asia. This is something, and it's a market of 115 million or 116 million people. So it's not negligible. So I think there is a lot of potential. There is a lot of potential to attract investment also, which goes hand in hand with trade. So I think if you look at the perspective, I think it's pretty good, and we should probably invest in the Philippines.
Right. I mean, is there recommendations by European friends and all? What are the areas perhaps the Philippines has to improve on? Because I'm going across the region. I'm going to Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. I see a lot of manufacturing, automotive, European investments coming in, and I feel Philippines still has to do some job on that.
Yes, as ambassador of the European Union to the
you don't want to give advice.
No, I tried not to tell my host country what to do,
or the concerns raised by your constituents.
But the concern raised sometimes is on the ease of doing business, obtaining permits, business permits can take a bit of time, and or seeking redress sometimes.
Right.
When you have fallout with your Filipino partner, let's say we have a joint venture, the two of us, and you run away with my money. So I want to be able to go to court and have a fair, have a day in court. These are things that the government of the Philippines is fully aware of, and we are trying to work out together.
Well, we appreciate that we're not being lectured by friends and counterparts. I mean, this is always important. In fairness to the European Union, you have been helping the Philippines on many fronts, capacity building, even with the Department of Finance.
Mindanao.
Peace process, definitely. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then perhaps we can even go to the issue of GSP+, which seems to be a secured issue for the foreseeable future.
Right.
Can we discuss how helpful EU has been? I know you guys are kind of low-key, but there's one big country in this part of the world that keeps on bragging about how much help and assistance it brings, and I call it, it's more like a pledge trap, right? A lot of pledges, but not much coming in. In fairness to Europe, especially European Union, there has been a lot of help, and sometimes my joke to our friends is you're not good capitalists. I think Macron even said something like our problem with EU is that we're not good in good salesman for our own success.
I try to be the best salesman I can.
Let's put on the salesman hat. Yeah.
No, we invest a lot. We have invested a lot in peace in the South. That's for sure. Both politically, but also in practical terms, on many levels. At the moment, we have a portfolio of 140 million euros.
Yeah, just to put things in context.
In grants.
Yeah.
So I think it probably makes us the biggest donor.
Biggest, yes.
In the BARM.
Yeah. Can you tell me about? It's like this is about capacity building, helping the BARM transition process, civil society groups, women empowerment. What's going on there?
It's about helping the normalization process, camp transformation. It's about capacity building of the BTA, building ministries that can really do their job, both in legislative terms, but also in operational terms.
Bureaucracy, which EU is very good at.
Yeah, we're pretty good. We're pretty good. And also socioeconomic development, because there is no long-term peace without socioeconomic development. And to be honest, I think there is a lot of potential in Mindanao.
Yes,
definitely. A lot of potential.
Definitely, yeah.
In agriculture, in halal products for the region. So there is a lot of potential that we are trying to help concretize.
And the Mindanao food, I mean, the Maranao food is amazing. And it has to be part of the Filipino cuisine that I think has been not appreciated enough.
And also, you should have geographic indication for chocolates and stuff.
Exactly. I'm asking you
Back
because
to FDA.
Yeah. No. Now let's talk about the GSP Plus. Can you explain shortly for some people who are not familiar with this kind of it sounds like a chat GPT, right? Like, what is this GSP Plus and how important it is for Philippine exporters, small and medium enterprises who want access to EU?
It has been in place since 2014. Has never been suspended. And basically, exports of the Philippines to the EU has doubled over the period from 14 to 22, from
8 years,
4 to almost 9 billion euros.
Yeah,
with a surplus, by the way, of over 1 billion euro, which is huge. Which is huge. Basically, this is the capacity for the Philippines to export at zero tariff to a market that is, as I said before, almost 500 million people.
Yeah, among the wealthiest in the world. Yeah,
with a GDP per capita that is significant.
Yeah.
So that's not negligible, and the Philippines is making the best use of that, or a very good use of that.
Yeah.
With a 70-80% utilization rate. So that's a major help in particular for some sectors of the economy, like agriculture, fisheries, but also electronic parts, machineries, and so on. So it's significant, and it's not a gift to the government of the Philippines necessarily. I have seen that sometimes. It's like a reward to the government. No, it's definitely a potential possibility for sectors of the Philippine economy.
It's a preferential treatment, isn't it?
It's a preferential treatment.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is based on the respect of a number of conventions, which, by the way, the Philippines has signed already.
Yes.
It's not something new that, sort of colonial power would say, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that. You sign up to these conventions, and we're just monitoring that, the implementation of those conventions that you have signed is satisfactory. So there is a conditionality, and there was a recent report to the European Parliament and Council from the European Commission, which showed that it's not a pass or fail scorecard, but definitely it's heading in the right direction.
It's more like nudging in the right direction or something like that. What about the green initiatives, green infrastructure initiative? I mean, I just came from Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden. Everything was electric. I mean, even the plug-in in the airports, really ahead of everything else I've seen anywhere on Earth. And I was really amazed how far, at least parts of Europe have come towards almost 100% renewable energy. To what degree is Europe going to be active in the Philippines, or has already been active in the Philippines?
When our president came here, we signed a letter of intent, and we are now finalizing the contracting with the Philippine government of a green economy project of 60 million euro in grants, and we start with the plastics. So we are very much aligned with the priorities of the Marcos administration, addressing the issue of plastic and the use of plastic in the Philippines.
Because it's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
It's a very big problem.
It's a big problem. And what is important for an international partner is to be aligned on the priorities of the government. It's not to tell, again, it's not to tell the Philippine government, you should do this, that, and no. What are your priorities and how much they align with our objectives? So that's the way we do business.
Are we looking at some green infrastructure projects, like some renewable big projects together with some EU members?
What is very important on this issue of plastics is to work both at policy level, so we're creating a policy dialogue, if you wish, but also working at a very concrete LGU level and with the private sector. So there are three levels on which this project will be articulated.
So LGU, public-private partnership.
There will be champions, LGU champions that we have identified, or we are in the process of identifying with the Philippine government, and there will be a dialogue with private partners, and there will be transfer of know-how also from European companies. We have been dealing with circular economy issues for quite a while now, and we might learn also from the Philippines, because I say sometimes, a partnership is not only about we Europeans, giving you tips on how to do things. We can learn stuff from you. Another example of that, in my view, is Earth observation.
Yeah.
We have a 10 million euro project called Copernicus, where we share data from our satellites with the Philippines. And it helps in terms of
weather forecasting,
disaster mitigation, and so on. And as I say, sometimes we will learn stuff also on the warming of the seas and so on from you using our data.
What is the general take of the European Union on the ICC issue? I know you're not here to lecture the Philippines or a government what to do about it, but have you been encouraged about conversations or push to make sure the Philippines is open to impartial, comprehensive investigation to ensure we get down to the bottom of what happened during that 6 years of very scorched earth drug war, claiming thousands of lives?
It is a delicate matter because it would be very wrong. We believe in the independence of the International Court.
Right.
All our member states, by the way, have a fairly well-functioning judiciary, and all our member states are member of the Rome Statutes of the ICC. So that's our position. But we do not generally comment on proceedings, by the way, and even less on the political debate in the Philippines on the ICC. But definitely for us, being part of the ICC is a good thing, because we are.
Sorry, I put you on the spot on there.
No.
I know this is a delicate issue, but it's very important, and we naturally think about our democratic partners and allies, including the European Union, when issues like human rights and democracy come to the fore. Now, lastly, I want to talk about partnership, because we had Ambassador Eduardo de Vega here, who has worked a lot. He was in Brussels for quite some time.
Good friend.
And he's very encouraged by how the Philippines is seen as a partner, international partner, even for mainstreaming certain norms internationally. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Philippines is seen as an active partner, not just a recipient of aid and another third world country we want to help? You get what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of encouragement and on that front, that the Philippines is seen as a legitimate active partner of the European Union.
First of all, I strongly believe that the Philippines will pretty soon be in an upper middle income country. That's a given. So definitely not a third world, subpar, whatever. Not at all, and not in our minds. And I think also that the Philippines is very engaged in international affairs. We do not always agree, the Philippines and the European Union. We have sometimes disagreements. But there is nothing, and mind you, not even under the previous administration, the dialogue was never interrupted.
Right.
Never interrupted. We have our mechanism where we sit down together, we compare notes, we work together.
Right. And last thing, I needed to squeeze this out. I didn't talk about the elephant in the room, China.
Right.
How do you see the China question or the China challenge? I think the term that EU uses is systemic rival, right?
Among other things, but also a partner.
And a partner. How do you see it?
And a competitor.
Exactly, because we have had guests.
All of that.
We have guests from the United States, from other countries who have quite a different take. It looks like EU has its own unique take. It's despite your NATO and transatlantic alliance with the United States, to what degree is the EU stance towards China something unique, and how is that shaping your Indo-Pacific strategy in general?
We will have a summit, an EU-China summit in a few weeks, maybe when this
so
podcast,
before the end of 2023.
Absolutely, early December. We want to engage with China. There is no way in which we can deal with a number of issues around the world without talking to China. So we do talk, and we don't have we're not in a confrontation. We might have disagreements, we might have trade disputes, we might have other kind of disputes. We definitely have different systems. We are definitely a liberal democracy, or liberal democracies, if we talk about our nations. So we have different systems, but we talk to China.
I mean, you're an economist, so I mean, the issue of the risk has come up a lot, because the coupling is almost impossible. China is just so integrated in the global economy. And we saw earlier this year Macron and von der Leyen and all of them visiting. Also Scholz visiting Beijing, and the impression we get in Asia is that EU is signaling a more distinct approach to this issue of the risk than our American counterparts. We have had American guests on this show who very much emphasize the military threat from China and the risk to critical infrastructure. I just generally noticed the language from our European counterparts is slightly different. Is this like two sides of the same coin, or is this really a reflection of the unique relationship you have with China, which is not necessarily shared by other major Western democracies?
I think there are some differences, definitely, in terms of tone, in terms of... I'm not saying that we are on different planets, so we have completely different analysis. We also share concerns vis-a-vis, as I said before,
South China
aggression of China. Their claim to sort of privatize the South China Sea. This is something we cannot accept because a large portion of our trade is transiting through the South China Sea. So we are very attached to the freedom of navigation and overflight in the region.
And critical infrastructure investment. I mean, Australians have been very sensitive about this for quite some time. We see also in Taiwan, we see in many countries, including the Philippines, discussions about this.
Yes, we have also our concerns, and sometimes we will make decisions to protect, but also to promote. As I said, to promote, to protect, and definitely we want to de-risk. We have seen with COVID that we were dependent, for example, for medication, for certain components here or there.
PPEs,
so it's important that we retain some sovereignty, but at the same time, we are so much attached to free trade, so much attached to the openness of our economies. So we want to combine both.
I mean, the reason I ask is because, in ASEAN, well, not necessarily maybe in the Philippines, but in other ASEAN capital, I usually go. The term that almost comes up is indispensable stakeholder. That China is an indispensable stakeholder that we have to engage and has to be part of the solution as much as it's a part of problem. Is this something that the European Union also shares, similar to us?
To be honest, we had some waking up in terms of our economic dependencies with the Ukraine, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, that help us reconsider some of the reasoning of, if you become interdependent economically,
the German strategy, Merkel strategy,
a good thing, and so you have to be careful with that.
And realistic that trade doesn't necessarily bring convergence of interest and
necessarily peace.
Or necessarily peace. On that note, thank you very much, Ambassador Veron.
Thank you very much.
I am sorry if I put you on the spot, but I'm not sorry. This is my job. This is what we do in this show. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. I'm Richard Hidarian, and that was The View from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.